Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, what life is like in the industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities that he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight on the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, and also various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we will be discussing the Holy Mother of Rosary Church in Chicopee, Massachusetts. So, what is the history of this church?
This church is sure in Chicopee. It's very close to the modern Chicopee Public Library, so it's easy to find. And I hope you go see it because it's such a quaint little church, one of those white clapboard buildings. But the history is very interesting. Now, we're not only going to talk about the history of the church, we're also going to talk about the cemetery, the school, the convent, the rectory, and the social hall, because even though they're always small, they want it to be a complete place. And they succeeded in doing that. And that just shows you the dedication and the sacrifice of money from these people that didn't have much money coming over from Poland. So we're going to talk about what the layout of the campus is like, and then what the parish is like still. And then one very curious fact about this wonderful little church. All right, so the Holy Mother of the Rosary Church was chartered to exist in 1897. They had to oppose the Roman Catholic Church, and that's a big deal. And the first members that chartered it were all excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church. That's how big a deal it would be. But they didn't think their needs were being met with the church in Chicopee. And its first Mass was October of 1898. All right, now, the land on Bell Street was purchased from a person named Bell, and plans were formulated to get things going. Then they hired a pastor, and the Masses started being held on a nearby church. So they had the land, they had the charter, and the Mass was held off the church, and things were begun built. But of course, it takes a while to get things going, and there wasn't a full Mass within the church until 1901. And supposedly that bell was cast by a person from Chicopee, Melzar Mosman. Now, it says on it something different. So if you read the inscription on it, it states a certain company, I think it was in New Jersey. So, was it really built in Chicopee or was it in New Jersey? So, I don't know what was going on. All right, and it had to get a name for itself. And at first, its name was the Independent Polish Roman Catholic Church of the Holy Mother of the Rosary. And if you count up the number of words there, I believe that was 12 words in a title. That's incredible. And even by 1911, they decided to change the name to the Holy Mother of Rosary Polish National Catholic Church, and that itself is only 8 words long, which is a lot better. But I just call it the Polish National Church or the Rosary Church.
And what is the campus like?
Oh, the campus is very nice. If you go alongside of it, it sweeps from left to right with the church, then in the middle the rectory, and then on the right-hand edge, the school. And the bell is now taken out of the steeple and it's down in the front yard. They put it in the backyard for a while, but now it's in the front yard. And so you have all the vital pieces of a church campus right out front. Now, they didn't stop there because they wanted a social function hall for themselves. And that social function hall was a building that they purchased in back of the rectory itself. So they bought that building outright, and then also the nuns that served the school, they needed to have a place to live, and I believe they lived in a home towards the back also. So they had 5 buildings going. So what a campus for for a few hundred people to get all this going is superb, and the church and all the buildings are still in great shape.
And really quick, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, to find out more information, or if you're interested in signing up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can also find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, is the parish still active?
The parish is very active still has a pastor there. The churches and rectory are still used. The school is now a social function hall, and that school is the youngest piece of all these. It's from the year 1937. It's not a school anymore. They don't have enough students to be active, but it's used social function hall. It's used as a Sunday school. So the social function hall they used to own in back is now sold, and the convent is now sold. So these are 3 buildings in the front-hand side. But they're still active. They still have lots of members. I've never got inside. This is one of the future, so I've never got inside because it's kind of outside my realm. I'm not Polish. And so I wonder what it's like inside. It must be beautiful because everything else outside is quite beautiful.
And this used to be a cathedral?
Yes. So, it turns out that the first pastor, the founder of this great Holy Rosary Polish National Church, was also the bishop. And his name was Vicente Gawryczkowski. He is buried at the Holy Rosary Cemetery with great honors. And now he was a pastor. And when the national church, the Polish National Church, came about within the United States, they needed to set up a system where there'd be the equivalent of a pope, and then there'd be the equivalent of bishops. Now, there's not a real pope in the system. They call it something else. But they do have bishops, and they call them that. And in the beginning, they had 2 bishops. One served out towards Illinois, because in Chicago, there were a lot of Polish people. And then one served the New England area, because there were a lot of Polish in the mill towns of New England. And so those first 2 bishops, one of them, served as a pastor at the Holy Rosary Church. And this Vicente served in this capacity for an extremely long time. And he really made the campus very strong, and he made the parishioners really love this place. Now, a bishop, the place that he serves Mass at, the grounds that he lives on, are a cathedral. So Chicopee had a cathedral because the Holy Mother of the Rosary Church was the Holy Mother of the Rosary Cathedral. And the rectory was the place the bishop was living. So incredibly, Chicopee had a cathedral.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And of course, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And check out a large selection of our other podcasts at his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. Thank you for tuning in. So today you're going to be telling us about the Holy Mother of the Rosary Cemetery in Chicopee. So describe the history of the cemetery.
Hi. The church itself was started in Chicopee 1896 as a Polish National Church. And of course, if you start a new church with a new mission to it that's not Catholic, you need to have a cemetery. So in 1897, they bought part of the Fairview Cemetery, and they made it into their Polish National Cemetery. They would call it the Holy Mother of the Rosary Cemetery at a later date. But when you're very poor, you can't afford much, and so you might think you'd have these gorgeous old stones in this cemetery, but you don't. The reason why is because the people were so very poor coming from Poland over here. They were so poor that they couldn't afford beautiful gravestones. They could barely afford their churches and schools and cemeteries. So what happened was, when they died, they'd have a simple, very wooden cross or a simple metal cross, trying to have the best they can for themselves. Now, in this cemetery, you also have people or flaming plots, and those you can see some of the older ones. But if you go in there thinking, oh, I'm going to find some 1897 burials, well, you forget it. The oldest one, I think the oldest one I found was like in 1909. And then there's a lot of 19-teens. And then starting in the 1920s, you get some better flaming plots and better single graves, but they're not that great. Then definitely 40s, 50s, 60s, you get much better plots. Everyone in America was getting better off, and you could afford better for themselves. So it's hard to find the old stones in this cemetery. Now the history, of course, it was taken out of the Fairview Cemetery, which was a Protestant cemetery. And at some point they said, well, let's make this into a better looking cemetery. They did that by putting in new gates towards the front and also moving where the bishop was. Oh, what do I mean by that? Well, that's our next statement.
So there is a bishop buried here. How is that?
How is there a bishop buried in Chicopee? How is there a bishop buried anywhere in western Massachusetts besides Springfield? It sounds impossible because the Catholic diocese was based in Springfield. All the former bishops are buried there, maybe 5 or 6 of them. Now, the Polish National Church is not truly aligned with the Roman Catholic Church. They're a breakoff. They want to be called the Catholic Church, but they're the Polish National Church. That means they're a new denomination. And you got to set up structure. So you can have the priests, sure, you can have your nuns as teachers, but you need an administration. And that means you need to have a bishop. And you need to have a cardinal. What they don't have is a pope. So they didn't have that high a level, but you'd have the bishops, 2 of them in the United States, and you have 1 cardinal for the Polish National Church. So the cardinal is based in, I think, Western New York. The 2 dioceses only, one was based in the East New England in New York, and the other was based in the West, by West I mean Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, where most of the Polish were ended up going. So you need an Eastern bishop and a Western bishop. The first Eastern bishop was a person, Valente was his first name, and that is a contraction and a changeover. And his last name was Gawryczkowski, and he was the first pastor and first priest and the founder of this church in Chicopee, called the Polish National Church and later the Holy Mother of the Rosary Church. He was also the first bishop, but he was only assigned as a bishop from 1925. Now, he died in 1934. He served as a pastor for 37 years and really got this community going. But when he died in 1934, he was buried in the cemetery that he founded, and he was buried in a location towards the front. Now, even that has changed, because in 1961, they took his body and moved it towards the middle of the cemetery, and of course put it 6 feet deep, and built a gravestone memorial that is in the shape of an altar above him. And they left at the original burial place another stone that is a statue of Jesus. So he has 2 locations where it seems that he's buried. Both of them have his name. He's below the one that looks like an altar. So if you ever go there, always remember that. And all other burials are behind him in this cemetery. So this triangular cemetery has a big empty front. You besides this one bishop, and then behind it, a lot of his parishioners.
So, describe the history of the Polish National Church.
Okay, the history of the Polish National Church is such that they wanted to break away, and they didn't want the Pope to tell them everything to do. But as soon as you say that, you're in trouble, because this is a top-heavy administration. He excommunicated anyone that said that, including 4 people in Chicopee, and thus they paid the price, and they started up their own denomination, the Polish National Church. They ended up calling it the Holy Mother of the Rosary Church. This church is still there with the original church, the original school, the original convent, and the original rectory, all on the same street in the same location. So it's a very quaint looking church. It's still white and is wooden boards, just like it was in the beginning. And by doing that, it makes it look very old, which it is. But I think there was a fire in church at one point, so they had to refurbish it. That's why it's still in great shape. Now, the history includes, of course, the person becoming a bishop. It includes the parishioners trying really hard to get all the things they wanted going. The school might not have lasted for a long time, but they changed it into a civic center. The rectory is still there, probably. It's still an active church, so probably the modern-day rector still lives in the pasture.
Fill our listeners in. If you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. In there he has both videos of the various stops along each tour and also past and present photos of the historical sites throughout as well. And if you are interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, and they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family, or for your group parties, especially those special occasions or get-togethers. And they're also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So, getting back to our interview, are there any curious gravestones?
If you want to find oddball gravestones, go to the very back of the cemetery where there's a fence. And along that fence, you'll find like a stone cross, one that might be from like 1900s or over 120 years ago. And also you're going to find a metallic one that is very old from the 19 teens. And if you walk along, you also find some very peculiar ones in terms of they were written in Polish, so they're hard to understand. So if you want to find those really cool ones, go to the back fence and read all these wonderful ones. There's even one family plot back there, squeezed in there, so it's hard to find. So I suggest you go there either as a separate trip or a trip that combines the church campus together with the cemetery, or a trip that combines, of course, the Fairview Cemetery with the Holy Mother of the Rosary Cemetery. So any combination would be great for a day trip.
So thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours, and we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune in to a large selection of our other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And also, again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, at yahoo.com. And be sure to keep an eye out for his upcoming 2024 season tours and more as they become available. Thank you for tuning in.